U.S. to prove Raymond Davis immunity in Pakistan. The U.S. government has announced that it will prove before a Pakistani court later this week that the U.S. citizen in custody over deaths of two men in Lahore has diplomatic immunity. Raymond Davis was remanded for 14 days on Friday over last month's killings. Mr. Davis, 36, has admitted he shot the men, but says he acted in self-defense as they were trying to rob him. The case is threatening to detail U.S. ties with Pakistan, a crucial ally in the fight against militants. U.S. Senator John Kerry is on his way to Pakistan to help resolve the diplomatic row sparked by Mr. Davis' arrest. Mr. Kerry, who is also the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, is due to hold talks with senior officials in Islamabad. He will also reaffirm U.S. support for Pakistan, the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad says. Bahrain protests. King announces probe into two deaths. The King of Bahrain has gone on television to announce the investigation into the deaths of two protesters killed in clashes with security forces. On Tuesday, a mourner was shot dead at the funeral of a protester killed when police fired a barrage of tear gas and rubber bullets in the capital, Manama. Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa offered his condolences to the men's families. UN reports as violence against Afghan children growing. An increasing number of children are being killed and injured in the Afghan conflict, mostly by Taliban and other militants, a new UN report says. The study covers a two-year-old period from 1 September 2008, which the UN says was marked by increased military activity and worsening security. It said suicide, rocket and bomb attacks as well as ongoing military operations were to blame. Japan mass food poisoning fears in Hokkaido schools. More than 950 school children have fallen ill at 9 schools on Japan North Hokkaido Island in a suspected outbreak of food poisoning. 13 children are in hospital in the city of Lomizawa. 48 teachers and other school staff also have symptoms. The affected schools will remain closed until the end of this week. The outbreak was so widespread because, like many cities in Japan, Lomizawa operates large central kitchens which deliver food each day to many schools. 3 of those kitchens have been shut as well as while an investigation is carried out. The children began to fall ill last week after eating lunch of miso soup, salad and Japanese radish with minced meat. In all, 953 students have been affected, but none is in a critical condition. After earlier incidents of food poisoning, schools in Japan were required to keep samples of all meals served over the previous 7 days. They are being tested to determine the cause of the outbreak, but health authorities suspect salmonella may be to blame. Pakistani singer Rahat Fateh Ali Khan released in Delhi. Pakistani singer Rahat Fateh Ali Khan has been released after being held at Delhi airport for allegedly carrying a large amount of undeclared cash. Officials say the singer has been allowed to leave the airport, but his passport has been confiscated. South Sudan, Jonglei attacked by Athor rebels killed 200. Some 200 people were killed in a massacre in South Sudan last week, officials say. Most of the dead were civilians, including children, and others chased into a river by rebels, a minister said. Previous estimates said that about 100 people had died when fighters loyal to rebel leader George Athor attacked. The deaths came as the region prepares for independence from the north after last month's referendum. News analysis condoles the death of the children and their governess who died in the Thiruvananthapuram school bus accident. We'll move on to the business world. Food prices at dangerous levels, says World Bank. The World Bank says food prices are at dangerous levels and have pushed 44 million more people into poverty since last June. According to the latest edition of its Food Price Watch, prices rose by 15% in 4 months between October 2010 and January this year. Food price inflation is felt disproportionately by the poor, who spend over half their income on food. The bank called on this week's G20 meeting to address the problem. The World Bank's president, Robert Zerlich, said in a statement, global food prices are rising to dangerous levels and threaten tens of millions of poor people around the world. He also said the rising of food prices were an aggravating factor of the unrest in the Middle East, also not its primary cause. Rapid food price inflation in 2008 sparked riots in a number of countries. At that time, the World Bank estimated 125 million people were in extreme poverty. The World Bank says the prices are not quite back at those levels, just 3% below, although they are 27% higher than a year ago. A separate report earlier this month from the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, said that the world food price had hit a record high in January. Finance ministers and central bankers from the G20 group of developed and developing nations are meeting late this week in Paris. Welcome to the world of science. Stardust spacecraft makes comet flyby. NASA's Stardust spacecraft has swept past the comet Tempel 1. The encounter early on Tuesday GMT will give scientists unique information on how those great balls of ice and dust change over time. Tempel 1 was visited by another probe back in 2005. It fired a projectile and the body to disturb the surface. Stardust images will reveal the extent of the impact crater and any other alterations that may have occurred on the 7.5-kilometer wide object. The spacecraft got about 180 kilometers, 110 miles of the comet nucleus. It was commanded to take more than 70 high-resolution images. Its dust analysis instrument will also have investigated the environment around the object.
So you just
comes close to the sun. It loses a lot of material. It heats up, ices evaporate, but we don't know where those changes on the comet occur. And why is that important? Well, we want to understand how comets work, because there are parts of the surface that are very old, parts that are very, very young, because they change, and we can't tell them apart. And later on, in the future, when we go to the surface of a comet to bring back materials, we want to be able to figure out whether we're sampling something that's, very, very ancient or something that's been changing recently. So we have to understand how and where comet surfaces change when ices sublimate. This is our first chance to do that.
And in sports, Cricket World Cup WOW backs one-day game for revival. The 50-over format is set for a major revival at the 2011 Cricket World Cup, which starts on Saturday, according to Australian legend Steve Waugh. But Waugh believes a successful World Cup for India and their co-hosts Bangladesh and Sri Lanka will return to the format to its former popularity. You'll see a resurgence in 50-over cricket, especially in India, he said. They're so up for it. It's already at saturation point in local media, and if they do well, the 50-over game will be right back up here, he told sports reporters. The 10th edition of the Cricket World Cup starts with the opening ceremony in Dhaka on Thursday, with the first game, India versus Bangladesh, taking place 2 days later, also in the Bangladeshi capital. And before we close today's bulletin of news analysis, let's have a recap of the main points. Iran uses force against protests as region erupts. Obama's budget focuses on path to rein in deficit. Upheaval opens exits in Tunisia. Palestinian Leader Dissolves Cabinet. Silvio Berlusconi faces Ruby's sex charge trial in April. Egypt crisis army sets constitution reform deadline. And there we end today's bulletin of news analysis. Be with us in the coming weeks too. Thank you.